free choice to accept or reject thoughts. Nothing compels you to think anything except your own desires. So use your mental switch and dictate your thoughts. Believe that you can improve. And guess what? You will.
Welcome to Some Stutter Law, Newfoundland and Labrador's first podcast about living with communication differences. It is a production of the Communication Collaborative and is in solidarity with the Newfoundland and Labrador Stuttering Association. My name is Greg O'Grady. I am a person who stutters and your host. Some Stutter Law is a unique opportunity for us to discuss topics, experiences, and perspectives on what it is like to live with communication differences, to live with a disability, but also to uplift and inspire, to rebuild confidence through inclusive language and themes, and to instill hope by dismantling myths, stigma, stereotypes, and barriers surrounding speech, language, and disability challenges. Some Stutter Law is a safe space to speak and to own your truth, a safe space to communicate differently without the fear of being judged or feeling shame. If you only get one thing from this podcast, we hope it's this. It's okay to stutter and it's okay to communicate differently. It's not how we communicate that's important, it's the message that's important. So let's communicate differently without the need to ask permission or to apologize for being you. For further information about the Communication Collaborative or this podcast, you can find us at somestutterlaw.ca. Today, Some Stutter Law warmly welcomes Lee Lovett. Welcome, Lee. I was first introduced to our guest today, Lee Lovett, by recent Some Stutter Law guest, Danny Miguel, a 34-year-old person who stutters. Danny, Some Stutter Law episode aired on June 4th, 2023, and the audio-only version is available from our website, somestutterlaw.ca. In my conversation with Danny, he discusses a book he found earlier this year called How to Stop Stuttering and Love Speaking, published by our guest, Lee G. Lovett. After diligently immersing himself in the author's methods, it greatly reduced Danny's stuttering after 2 to 3 months. Danny has become a strong advocate and supporter of Lee's How to Stop Stuttering and Love Speaking program. Danny wanted every stutterer to be aware that How to Stop Stuttering and Love Speaking program is truly a godsend. During our Some Stutter Law conversation, I was impressed with Danny's fluency. There was not a hint of stuttering during our conversation. So as a person who stutters, with years of lived experience with stuttering, my interest was piqued and I wanted to meet and have a conversation with this guru of how to stop stuttering. Lee, thank you for taking the time to join me in a conversation this morning. So welcome very much.
My pleasure.
Lee, I love how you sign off your email communications. If I can say any word, anywhere, anytime, I can say and love to say any word, anywhere, anytime. I also appreciate you saying that people who stutter have the option to live a stutter-free life. I feel that many people who stutter would desperately love to hear a stutter-free life, love to live a stutter-free life. We'll talk a bit more about this in today's episode. Lee, thank you very much for sending me some of your life activities, and I'm amazed with all the accomplishments that you have done to advocate and support stuttering. Just to name a few, I can't go through them all, but you stuttered to the age of 30 and overcame fears of it by the age of 40. You created the new science methods of stopping stuttering, helped others part-time for decades for free. In 2016, released Stuttering and Anxiety Self-Cures. In 2016, began coaching people who stutter for free, 1,000 plus sessions a year, and released in 2016 Words You Need to Know. In 2020, you helped create the world's only community of ex-stutterers, and you continue to coach 10 to 30 people who stutter for free every week. You continue to prove every month that stuttering can be stopped, as over 90% of your students stop stuttering. Lee, a few questions now. Lee, I have lots of questions for you. We may have to bring you back for our part 2 and 3 of Some Stutter Law, but we will start here. Lee, first and foremost, I identify you as a moment ago as a guru of Stop Stuttering. Do you consider yourself a guru of Stop Stuttering?
You know, Greg, dictionaries define guru as a spiritual or influential or popular teacher. And spiritual means many different things to different people. What I am is for others to say, not for me. And labels in general can be misleading and thus not helpful. I will say that now, after decades in retirement, I have only one cause: to kick stuttering off the planet. For decades, I've been helping stutterers as a pastime, and for the past 10 years, full-time, 7 days a week, over 300 days a year. And I've never taken one dime from any stutterer. I've also funded most of the costs of the charity that I created to help PWS. In these past 10 years, I've personally coached over 7,000 hours of several hundred stutterers and helped 90% of them find their path to fluency, meaning not appearing to be stutterers and to live seamlessly in the fluent world. I help stutterers find ways to live seamlessly in the fluent world. That is who I am. Others may call me whatever they wish.
Admirable work, Lee. Lee, before we continue, can you share a little about your history as a person who stutters?
Well, I began stuttering in my teens and when called upon in class to read aloud. It slowly snowballed. Inexplicably, it came and went like a ghost. I could be fluent for days and then stutter for most of the time for days. Whenever I felt comfortable, I did not stutter. My family never heard me stutter until I was around 25 years old, trying my first case in court. I could not say my own name or my client's name or much of anything else. It was a disaster beyond the power of my words to express. I was then married. I had 2 children, and I was broke. I wanted to die. I was raised in a very religious family. We did not believe in doctors. I had never been in a doctor's office at that time. But I had enough money to pay for 6 sessions with a psychiatrist. I went to the late Dr. Frank S. Caprio, author of many books. He told me that he did not know any way to stop stuttering, but he believed that self-hypnosis would help me. I studied self-hypnosis and began giving myself 3 20-minute treatments daily. I did this for years and years. It began to help my stuttering immediately. Slowly, very slowly, I stumbled upon methods, tools, strategies, which I then called crutches and later added the term speech plans, that I could use to help me avoid stuttering. Like the crutches that are used to avoid walking or re-breaking a broken legs long enough to allow them to heal, my speech crutches slowly enabled me not to stutter. After around 3 years, around age 30, I had stopped stuttering. I still feared it for another 10 years. However, I no longer stuttered. Fear is not stuttering. As a lawyer, I was forced to speak a great deal and to give many speeches in court and elsewhere. Over time, I grew to enjoy speaking, and the fears of it slowly died. By age 40, I had stopped fearing speaking. Since then, I have grown to literally love speaking. I still do. As a hobby of sorts, I began helping other stutterers, which led me to this day and to talking to you.
Thank you, Lee. Lee, in your recent book that Danny highly recommends, How to Stop Stuttering and Love Speaking, which you refer to as a magnum opus on the topic, can you tell us what this book is about?
Well, that book is 700 pages, and I can't summarize it fairly in a few sentences. Since I wrote it, I have written a Cliff Notes book of sorts on the subject. It is called Stop Stuttering Short Course, and it's only 86 pages. You'll find both those books on Amazon, along with 6 other stuttering-related books I've written. This short book is called It's Stop Stuttering Short Course. Now, the long book is much better, but the short course gives a good summary. So back to your question. What are the contents of my long book and my short book? These books focus on things that a stutterer can do to stop appearing to be a stutterer and to live seamlessly, eventually, in the fluent world. That's it in a nutshell. And believe it or not, some of my students have read my long book 2, 3, 4, even 5 or more times. One once told me, "I'll never stop reading your book." More than a few stutterers are suicidal, as I once was. When you're that desperate about something, you'll search for and devour as many books as it takes.
Thank you, Lee. Lee, it appears that you're being challenged about the word cure. I understand that for you, cure means not stuttering. You also use the quote from Shakespeare, "A rose by any other name would smell as sweet." To avoid offending speech professionals, you and your ex-stutterers do not use the word cure and simply refer to yourselves as having stopped stuttering and loving to speak. Can you elaborate on this?
Sure. When I wrote my first book, which was in 2015, I called it Stuttering and Anxiety Self-Cures. I then had no idea that the medical community frowned on the use of the word cure. I put my email address in my books, and I invite my readers to contact me, and I help as many as I can. And I answer their emails, and I give them live coaching. I quickly learned that I should never use the word cure. Dictionaries can offer very different definitions of words. According to Google, cure means relieve the symptoms of a disease or a condition. Well, I long ago relieved the symptoms of my stuttering. However, it took me a decade after I stopped stuttering publicly to stop fearing speaking in some situations. And even after that, decades later, I might still have a stutter fear thought that now and then that floated through my mind. And I taught myself so many ways to avoid stuttering that I have never relapsed. That is, I have never appeared to be a stutterer since around age 30. So I leave it for you and others to say, am I cured or not? You tell me. My goal is not to win a debate over semantics. I don't care what anyone else calls what I and my students do. So to avoid semantical arguments, we do not use the word cure. We simply say that we stop stuttering That is, we live seamlessly in the fluent world.
Interesting, Lee. Lee, as a person who stuttered for years, I mean myself, I have been told, and many of our fellow stutterers, that stuttering is incurable and that people who stutter must learn to accept stuttering. It's also said that the only thing a person who stutters can expect is, with help of speech therapy and treatment, is to find ways to help manage, control our stuttering. What are your thoughts about that?
Well, as I just said, we no longer appear to be stutterers. Now, if you had never met me before this day, this hour, and we were not talking about stuttering, we were talking about something else, and indeed you and I had not met until the last hour or so, and if we weren't discussing stuttering, would you believe that I am a stutterer? Since I do not believe that you would view me that way, and I would say you at a minimum would view me as a fluent person. Now, I did not accept stuttering, and I see no reason for most, over 90% in my experience with several hundred PWS, can stop stuttering and live their life inside the fluent world. That is our goal. Again, semantics don't help the problem. That's what we are. Am I a stutterer? I don't think so.
Mm. So,
And my students.
Lee, if I understand you correctly, then you're saying that there's no need for us to accept our stuttering, not to accept it.
In most cases, I believe over 90%. I think there are extreme cases that are very different. I've had a handful, less than 5, that stayed with a program and couldn't beat it yet. I never give up on anyone. As long as they'll stay with me, I'll stay with them. I'll make time. Once I start working with somebody, I never give up on them. I've coached some people over 100 times.
Okay.
I never give up. I won't give up
Mm.
because I'm not a quitter. Quitters don't win and winners don't quit, my high school baseball coach used to say. And I believe that. I will never quit. So, no, I do not accept it. And I don't believe that over 90% of those whom I help need to. Look, there are some people that have many other problems. I've worked with people who are autistic. I've worked with people with Alzheimer's and dementia. There are all kinds of people that I've worked with that have other burdens to carry. So I don't want to say everybody, but I will say 90% of those who stay with us.
Okay.
If they just try it for a couple of days and it doesn't work and they run away, I don't count that. Mm-hmm. You got to try. You got to do what we ask you to do.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I understand what you're saying. Now, during an interview with Burn News interview, that you were saying that no stuttering association on the planet will allow you or any of your ex-stutterers to speak at their events or post on their sites, and that will most of the stuttering communities on Facebook block you and anyone identified with you from posting on their sites. Given this reality, what keeps the fire, the passion to stop stuttering, burning in your belly? I mean, this is quite something if you're being prevented to speak. Well, what's going on here, Lee?
You know, Greg, we dwell on the positives. We dwell on the good that we do for ourselves and others. When I wrote my first of 8 stuttering-related books, I believed and still believe that if I only helped one PWS stop stuttering, all my effort would be worth it. At this point, I personally helped several hundred, I know that, stop stuttering. And at the suggestion of my ex-stuttering students, I began posting online their stories for anyone to see. I started that around 6 years ago. And at this point, we published over 200 of these stories. It didn't occur to me to do it originally. And this is not a business for me. And so we published them in text form. At the suggestion of other people who stopped stuttering, we began adding videos to those stories about 5 years ago. So it is our success in getting Stop Stuttering stories that keeps the passion alive, not what people say about our work.
Okay. Lee, with such a censorship happening, it is evident that you and your ex-stutterers' freedom of speech is being stifled. In many ways, when all said and done, they're being stifled. Is the core reason, and I'm just thinking about this, for such censorship may be related to either the lack of and the quality of science behind your methods? What do you feel will convince stuttering professionals and stuttering groups to let you speak? It is evident that given your history and plethora of success stories, what kind of data do you feel they require to help change their minds or let you speak? It appears that you're fighting an uphill battle. What are your thoughts, or does this really concern you? Do you need to provide some science? What are your thoughts?
Great question. We find no science behind the dogma that stuttering is, quote, incurable and must be accepted. On what is that science based? On 100 years or so of failed therapies. Why did those therapies fail? Because well over 90% of the therapists never stuttered, and the rest still stutter. Would you take golf lessons from someone who had never been on a golf course or who shot twice par? In less than a decade, we ex-stutterers have created the only real science on stuttering. It clearly demonstrates, seeing is believing, it clearly shows that most can stop stuttering and even learn to love to speak, as I do, and thus live seamlessly in the fluent world, as I have done from age 30 to now. As to fighting an uphill battle, virtually all of mankind's successes have come from those who fought uphill battles. We don't dwell on the negatives. We savor the positives and the domino effects of good that flow from every PWS who becomes a PWSS, a person who stops stuttering, thus improving his life and the lives of every person in his or her life. That is what sustains us.
Lee, you said that your methods produce ex-stutterers. How do you define an ex-stutterer?
How do we define an ex-stutterer? An ex-stutterer is one who no longer has incidents that a fluent person would say make the speaker a stutterer or speech disabled. In other words, we call those bad incidents, but it's got to be a clear bad incident. I can make a few mistakes right now in repeating some words, or I could force a word or two. That would negate everything you've heard from me so far today. Or if I then continued and had no further problems, you would not say, "Oh, Lee made a mistake, so he's a stutterer." You wouldn't say that, because all fluent people do that. All of them do that. They do repeats. They do force words. They do make grimaces. They do have strange body languages. They just don't do enough of them to be dubbed as someone who's speech disabled. So a bad incident, we say, it's very important how you grade yourself. If you want to stop stuttering, you've got to stop grading yourself severely. You yourself are close to a non-stutterer. With probably relatively little work, you could become a non-stutterer permanently if you wanted to do it. And I would be happy to help you. I'd be happy to Skype with you for a while, but I would ask you to do some things. I'd ask you to read more books. I'd ask you to join WSSA. It'll cost you $200, but a speech therapist costs you that for 1 hour. And you get the whole program. You get 2,000 coaching videos to look at. You get access to the SAM meetings. All these things. If you would do it You can walk away from stuttering permanently, and most of our cases take 2 to 3 months. And we say once a person has not had a bad incident, appearing clearly speech disabled to a fluent person, not a stutterer who thinks everyone who goes I is a stutterer. No, no. Someone who clearly appears to be, and you're borderline, not a stutterer. You're borderline right now. You're based on the way you're talking to me. You're close. But you got to go a month. Once you've gone a month without having a bad incident, we suggest to you that it's appropriate for you to write your own stop stuttering story and let us post it. And you say, "Oh, I can't do that. My profession is such that I can't do that." I say, "Okay, we'll post it without your picture, and we won't call you Greg. We'll call you George." But 90% of the people we post, we call them Greg because that's your name, and we post your picture because that's your face. And they let us do it because it helps other people. So a lot of people will let us do it. But the stories are real, and I've got emails and videos to prove it. I can, in most cases. Since we started doing videos, I've got videos of people at the beginning stuttering a lot more than you do, Pete. Yours is very, very mild, okay? You barely qualify. You qualify more in your own mind than in a stranger's. You're close to not qualifying. So, so I'm serious about my
Oh,
art.
thanks, Lally. I appreciate that. I really do.
I mean, if you want to leave it behind, let's leave it behind. You don't need it. I've coached people in their 70s, several of them. I've got a guy right now I'm coaching. He's 88 years old. He's a retired orthopedic surgeon, and he stuttered since he was 4 years old. And I got him almost over the hump now. He's a repeater, fast repeats. That's the way he talks. And I got him almost over it now. Anyway, that's the answer to the question.
Lee, I'm wondering now, like, when you talk about the evidence that 90% of those who stutter try your methods become ex-stutterers. So the evidence is the stories that they share and the videos you're posting. So that's the evidence you have, is it?
I kind of understand your question.
Yeah. What evidence is there that 90% of those who try your methods become ex-stutterers?
Well, before I've formed several organizations, and some have succeeded, others they've ended up being a big charity. But when I first started posting success stories, it was really some of my students who said, "Why don't you? How many successes have you had?" And I said, "Oh, dozens or whatever." I said, "Well, why don't you post the stories?" I said, "Well, I don't know. I didn't think about it." So with a handful of them, I decided Alcoholics Anonymous, as you know, or I assume, AA, is an organization where people who are alcoholics meet together and try and help each other not drink any more alcohol. And they never consider themselves to be, quote, healed or cured, similar to stuttering. And so they're always at risk of falling back into the trap. So I decided to form something called Speech Anxiety Anonymous. And my theory was that I could get people to come and share their stories, and they would help each other get over it. It's kind of like a clinic, if you will, online. So I formed this, and I started posting their stories. But the stories were written at first because I didn't record the earliest ones. But then I started recording them. So the answer to your question is multiple parts. Number one, it starts out with written texts. Now, if you go on Speech Anxiety Anonymous, if you write that down, or I'll email you the link or whatever. If you go on Speech Anxiety Anonymous, SAA, I call it for short, you'll see over 200 success stories. And you'll see pictures of most of them, and you'll see their names. And some of them have been updated several times by people who, I once in a while I go back to these people and I say, "How you doing? And can I have an update to add to your story?" I just don't have a lot of time for it, but I do that as I can. So I've got a couple hundred stories posted on there. Now, we formed another organization called Speech Anxiety Cures, which I can't do all this stuff. I
Mm.
can't. I'm not a website person. I barely understand how to turn a computer on. I can type, but I'm not a computer bug guy. So I have other people, and I've spent at this point well over $500,000 of my own money on these various programs, and they've all ended up in something we call World Stop Stuttering Association, which is a IRS approved charity, which offers my books and our program for as close to zero as you can get. The entire program, everything they've got, which is master classes, speech clubs, hangouts, 2,000 coaching videos, on and on and on, blogs, forums, you name it, and all of that for $200, and then private coaching for $50 an hour, and it loses money, and I pay the losses. And of course, what worries me is I'm long in the tooth. I won't be here forever, and I'm hoping that the organization won't die when I go. So I'm hoping that if they get enough members, they need many thousands of members at $200 in order to cover their losses. That they constantly have. We train some of our students. We train to coach, and then they get paid out of that $50. They're paid. And so, again, we believe that there are 80 million people out there allegedly stuttering. We believe that 90% of them or more should not be stuttering if they don't want to stutter. And we want to get them there as fast as we can do it. Mm-hmm. So I don't know if I answered your question or not.
You have, Lee. It's interesting while listening to you, Lee. I'm running through these thoughts. I mean, with all your success stories, okay, it's quite evident through all the excellent work you're doing to help people stop stuttering. Why doesn't the speech language pathologist invite you to speak to their groups, conferences? What's the disconnect here?
You'd have to ask them. I think most of them are not aware that we're alive. They've not read any of my books, and they haven't heard of my name. And those who have heard of it think, oh, he's a liar, he's a charlatan. It's bullshit, pardon my French. And so I think they don't believe it. And then those who probe into it, most speech language pathologists have very few, if any, cases of stuttering ever. And I have been told by many of them, if you look at my books, I've got quotes from the beginning of my books from a speech language pathologist endorsing our program. So some of them do. I'll read you what one says here. This is I put this quote in my last two books in what I call an introduction. And this is a quote. The Lovett method is a disruptive speech methodology that attacks stuttering and speech anxiety. It is now enabling many to become fluent and to learn to speak in all situations. I am incorporating it into my therapy, unquote. Marjorie Rosenthal 4, SLP, MACCC, SLP, DCSF, Rhode Island. Here's another one. I'll just read you two. I have read many books on stuttering and therapy and have taken courses, and most were very disappointing. I felt like I have fallen short with my students who stutter. Lee's book and program resonate with me. Conversely, I feel I have done well to simply not compound the stuttering problem. Having now read Lee's book and viewed some of his coaching, I feel much better equipped to really guide my students in an effective direction. I have joined Lee's group of ex-stutterers and those becoming ex-stutterers, and I am further educating myself on Lee's method, which have resulted in an incredible body of success stories. There does indeed now appear to be a light at the end of the stutterer's very long and dark tunnel. I am delighted to be part of it and offer my words in support. Peggy Beaulieu, MACCC, SLP, Florida. She was in the public school system in Florida. She was a teacher. And we have a few in Bermuda that a friend of mine, I don't have time for all this stuff. A friend of mine who loves what we do. He's not a stutterer, but he loves what we do. And he's helped me with some technical things. He says, God, your stuff ought to get known, man. It's terrible. So he took the trouble to go to the government here and get a list of all the SLPs in Bermuda. There are about 20 of them, and he organized a party himself. He found the space, he rented it, and this and that and the other thing. And he said, "Will you come in and explain, give a workshop to these people?" I said, "Sure." So, and he had it videoed and so forth. And so I went there, and about 10 people showed up. And out of that came a few. I mean, they all were surprised. I'm not sure that anyone there had ever coached a stutter. I'm not sure that they had. But when it was over, there were a couple of them who said, "We'd like to, be a part of this somehow." And you're a Bermudian, which I am. I'm British and I'm Bermudian. I'm also born in America, but I've become British and Bermudian being here so long. But they say, "You're Bermudian, and we view Bermuda now as the cradle of fluency for stutterers. We'd like to help you advance that ball." So they're forming a committee. They're asking for my help with that and writing some stuff, and I will do it. But I can't answer your questions. I think some of them view us as competition. Some of them think we're liars. We don't want to listen. We formed in WSSA, Greg. You'll be interested to know. We recently added a program for SLPs. We say, "SLPs, come in free. Everything is free for you. Everything is free for you. We'll give you all our methods. Look, we're not here to take credit. We're not here to take a bow. I don't want a bouquet of flowers. I don't want anything. I don't want anything. I want stuttering off this planet, and that's where it should be. And if I have any way I can do it, I'm going to do it. And if I don't, I'm at least going to start the ball rolling. It's going to go, Greg. It's going to go. Our methods work.
So Lee,
our methods.
So Lee,
and whatever stuttering you do, which isn't much, you do it your own choice. You're choosing to stutter. In my opinion.
Lee, is this invitation open to all SOPs in Canada to get your stuff free? Is that invitation extended beyond Bermuda? I'm curious now.
To SLPs, we take them from wherever they come.
Oh, okay. So that's wonderful.
Anywhere. India, China, you name it. Russia, Poland.
Lee, I'm wondering now, as a person who stutters, I feel, and it's that mental health remains, the realm of mental health of stuttering is sadly neglected. In your first stuttering book, Stuttering and Anxiety Self-Cures, Become the Boss of Your Mind, you stated that stuttering is a mental problem that is readily solvable for most, and it needs to be kicked off the planet ASAP. Can you elaborate on this? Because, I'm thinking about the Joseph Sheen, we use the analogy of the stutter iceberg. The 10% is the physical aspect of stuttering. 90% is the below the surface. How do you incorporate the mental component?
I don't hear well. I have hearing aids, but they do not solve the problem entirely. And some of your words, I can't understand you. I hear you, but I can't understand you. So if you could rephrase your question and pause between your words.
Surely, I apologize. Lee,
it's not your fault.
As a person who stutters, we use the analogy of the stutter iceberg, which was developed by Dr. Joseph Sheen. The iceberg analogy is called 10% of the iceberg of the stuttering is above the surface, which is the physical component, the repetitions, the prolongations, the blocks, and the secondary characteristics. Below the surface of the iceberg is all the emotional component, isolation, depression, alienation. So how do you incorporate the mental component, the emotional realm of stuttering in your...
That is the foundation of our methods. The mental component is the cause. Stuttering is nothing more than an ingrained habit. I call it the stutter habit chain, SHC, stutter habit chain. And we replace the stutter habit chain with a fluency habit. And we have a variety of ways of doing that. Again, it's hard to recount 700-page book in a
Mm-hmm.
few sentences, but basically we tell people that, and we believe, in fact, we think we know. There may be other ways to stop stuttering. Lord knows I hope there are. I just don't know what they are. But I do know our methods work. And basically we say, if you want to beat stuttering, you've got to hear fluency from your lips. That includes you, Greg. And you cannot hear disfluency from your lips. You can make mistakes. I make them, and you make them, and fine. But you can't make them at a level that appears to be a speech disability. And your own grading system needs to be really on the fluent side. If there's any question mark about it, you're fluent. You've got to grade yourself that way, because that's how you begin to forgive yourself and not constantly say everything when you're 90% right, you're still wrong because you're 10% wrong. No. So we have to hear fluency from our lips. Now, most of us, and we can't hear disfluency. How do we hear fluency? We ask them. Most people have stutter-free zones. That is, most can read aloud alone. Most can talk in the shower alone. Most can talk to their pets without stuttering. Many can talk to family members or their entire family, as I could, without stuttering, etc., etc. Those are stutter-free zones. We ask people to talk to the max in their stutter-free zones. We also ask them to make recordings of their voice, an animated recording to play during the day. Every day in every way, my speech grows better and better. Every day in every way, my speech grows better and better. That's Emile Coué, the great auto-conditioning philosopher, psychologist from the French world in the 1800s, the father of modern auto-suggestion. But so that's saying it in an animated way. I make a recording, I play that, and I say things like, I love to speak, I love to say my name, Lee. I love to speak to crowds. I love to speak to strangers, etc., etc., etc. And we have 10 affirmations, we call them, and we repeat. And the last one is always, today I'll make a happy day. That's mine. And so we ask them to repeat each one 20 times, which is Emile Coué's suggestion, and 20 times, and we ask them to do it twice a day, when they get up in the morning and before they go to bed at night. Preferably, the best way is seated in a reclining chair, nice and comfortable. But if you don't have time to do that, do it when you're jogging, do it when you're on your recumbent bike, do it while you're doing jump rope, do it while you're walking your dog. Just do it. And do it at least twice a day. You got to train, you got to program your mind. The evil cannot enter a mind already full. And the human mind requires programming, or the environment will program it for us. That's how we got no stuttering habit. Stuttering is an effect of a bad mental habit. And the habit is so ingrained with most of us, at one time at least, that when we start speaking, it automatically kicks in. But when we program our mind with, by number one, hearing fluency to the max, playing recordings during the day, and then we make monotone recordings every day in every way, my mind grows better and better. And we play those monotone recordings while we sleep at night. We pick up 8 hours, very softly, 8 hours of hearing fluency there. We hear 12 to 14 hours of fluency. Even the worst stutterers hear 12 to 14 hours a day of fluency from their lips every single day, 7 days a week. And then what happens when we are forced to speak and we're going to stutter? What are we going to do then? We cannot. The first thing is you got to hear fluency. I just told you how we do that. The second thing is you can't hear disfluency. How are you going to do that? That begs the question. If you knew how to do that, you wouldn't be talking to me or reading my book. So how are you going to do it? Well, you're going to use some methods. And we call them crutches, and we call them tools, we call them strategies, we call them speech plans. They're all a little bit different. There are a lot of things we do. I'd be happy to go over them with you. We don't have time here, but they're somewhat involved. We have charts and everything else. We ask you to learn them. We ask them to practice them, use them when you don't need them as well. And we gradually, when you learn to use these methods, you won't stutter. And I can prove it. I could probably prove it to you. I think I could show you enough in an hour that you would see that you'd see enough to believe me that the methods will work if you do them. But you got to learn these crutches because you can't keep doing what you're doing because you're always feeding the beast. But the minute you stop feeding him, he starts dying. And he will die. He will die if you don't feed him. And we don't feed him. But we call it a neuroscience method. It's based on neuroscience. Now, I wanted to quote you one thing. At the beginning of my books, really all of my stuttering books, these are the latest two, all of my stuttering books, I have a quote from Frank S. Caprio, the late Frank S. Caprio, who is a psychiatrist of some renown. He's long deceased, and he wrote several books. Helping Yourself with Psychiatry was one of them. And I went to him. I could afford 6 sessions, and I went to him, and I said, can you help me beat stuttering? When I was 25, I was desperate. I said, I got enough money for 6 sessions, and then I'm out of here. And he said, okay, let's go for it. So he said, what's the problem? And I told him. And he said, well, look, I don't know a cure for stuttering. He said, I don't know one. But he said, I do believe that if you take self-hypnosis, if you learn it and apply it, I said, I think it could help you a lot. It might do the job. I don't know. But I think it would help you a lot. So I then got a book that he recommended on self-hypnosis, and I learned it as best I could. And I began giving myself treatments 3 times a day, and I did it for years. And it began to help me immediately. I began to reprogram my mind. Now, in the beginning of my books, I have a quote from Frank S. Caprio. In my dedication, I dedicate all my books to you, the reader. It says to you, the reader. That's what it's dedicated to. And what does it say? I quote Frank S. Caprio. And what does he say? He says, we have free choice to accept or reject thoughts. Nothing compels us to think anything except our own desires. So use your mental switch and dictate your thoughts. Believe that you can improve, and you will.
Well,
I have never talked to a stutterer who did not agree with that statement.
Definitely.
Nor have I ever talked to a stutterer who did not agree. You pointed out that I sign all my emails with the words which are on the bottom of all my books, too. If I can say one word, anywhere, anytime, I can say any word, anywhere, anytime. I believe that to the marrow of my bones. And I've never had a stutterer who didn't agree with me. Never one.
It all sounds great, Lee. It actually does. What you're saying is making a lot of sense. It really is. Lee, I'm curious now. How would you factor in? What would you say to a covert stutterer, someone who's been hiding their stuttering for years? What advice would you give to someone like that?
Well, again, I don't like labels. Too many of us have different definitions of the same words. Socrates said, all conversations must begin with a definition of the key words. Covert is generally defined as not openly acknowledged or displayed. Now, in that sense, all stuttering is, at a minimum, partially covert, because all stutterers, at least subconsciously, try not to stutter. Moreover, virtually all stutterers are situational. That is, they stutter in some situations and at some times, but not in other situations and or at other times. So our goal, which we routinely achieve, in a matter of months is to stop stuttering. The fears do not end at that time. Fears of stuttering can persist long after we no longer appear to be stutterers. In that sense, while we still fear it, we are covert stutterers. Having neither stuttered nor feared stuttering in many decades, I consider myself to be an ex-stutterer and fluent, not covert.
Mm. Would you consider? I'm thinking now, like having taken speech therapy for a number of years. A lot of us have taken speech therapy. Do you do you
Oh, of course.
do
Most
you
of the
feel, Lee, that speech therapy can mask a stutter? You know what I mean? Like mask
can do
the
what?
stutter, as opposed. I mean, you're
Did you say M-A-S-K,
correct. Yeah.
mask? Okay. Um, I'm not sure what masking, once again, what masking means. Um, I, I have, most of the people that I've ever coached have had therapy. One of my guys, a Chinaman of all things, who came to the U.S. to get a master's degree in engineering at NYU, spent $30,000 on therapy. He stuttered terribly, grimaced, stuttered on every word, and had done all his life. And he was paying $150 a session. It was either $150 at $200 or $200 at $150. I don't remember. But he spent $30,000, and he stuttered just as badly when he was finished as he did when he started. And as most SLPs have told me, the ones that I know personally, they go through years of training to become an SLP, and they spend about 3 hours on stuttering. And he said they don't spend any time on it, and what they're taught is stuttering is incurable and must be accepted. Remember, that's what you write on your final exam. So that's their teaching. So they go out and they're trying to help people. Most of the people I know that have had therapy, the first thing that they were taught in therapy is, you can't cure stuttering. It's a life thing. You have to accept it. Well, why are they there? As many of them say to me, why am I there? And they're teaching me to elongate words or slow down or something, and that's the program. Now, I know that some SLPs have read my book, and I'm happy they have, and are using my book, and I'm happy they have. Because my goal is not to get a plaque. I've gotten a plaque, incidentally. I got a plaque, a Fluency Award, from a Canadian charity, of all things. I did. Last year. And they sent me a check for $5,000, too. And I donated it, of course, to our program. But in any event, but I've lost my train of thought. Masking. Yeah, I think there certainly must be SLPs who are helpful. Must be. But I'm afraid that too many of them have little to no experience with stutterers, and when they run into one, they don't know what to do. And that's only human, and that doesn't make them bad people. It's just the way they're educated. And again, the problem isn't theirs. The problem is they never stuttered, or they still stutter. So how can someone like that be expected to help someone? Stuttering is a mental problem. You got to understand it at its core. You've got to experience it to get it. I know how to block it because I've been through it. It's attacked me from every angle. No more. There is no angle it can attack me that I can't beat. None. I say, give me the mic. Give me 7 billion people listening. I'd love it. I would love it. At least give me the 80 million stutterers. I would love to say to them what I say to you. Because I want to help them. That's it. So masking, I'm not sure. I think it can help in some cases. But I think in truth, Alcoholics Anonymous does more for alcoholism than medical doctors giving people pills. And I think Speech Anxiety Anonymous and World Stop Stuttering Association and my books do more with ex-stutterers running the show, and I'm training a lot of them to do what I do, to run the show and help people like you. I think that's really where the answer is.
Yeah. When you're working with a person who stutters, okay? Now, because stuttering itself causes a lot of emotional and psychological upset. But when you add in other factors, such as if somebody is gay, lesbian, bisexual, if somebody has health conditions that can add to it, do you factor in all this in your treatment?
Largely irrelevant, because most of the books on stuttering before I started writing deal with the cause, not the effect. And they write on and on and on about the causes. When you get to the end of them, they say, well, all I can say is I've stuttered my whole life and I've had a good life anyway, so, it's not so bad. And that's the way the books work. They deal with causes. To me, there are two causes to stuttering, main ones. Number one, stutterers are perfectionists. And that's not a bad thing, because when you're a perfectionist, you try your best at things. So at least at some things. So at things you want to do well. So being a perfectionist can be a plus, but there's a point at which if you're trying to high jump 8 feet when the world record is 7 feet, 1 inch, you're setting yourself up for failure. But if you try and high jump 3 feet, and then maybe 3.25 feet, and maybe 3.5, you got a good shot. If you pick reasonable goals, you can make them. But you can't. Perfectionism is ridiculous. And so that's got to be stopped. And the second problem is, which is a bigger problem, stutterers are too worried about what other people think about them. And the cold reality is you can't control what other people think, and you never will. So the best thing for you to do is don't worry about what other people think. There's only one opinion of you that really matters, and that's your opinion of you. And I say to my students, most of my students are 18 to 35 years old. You and I, we're too old, for a lot of this, see. But I do get them in their 70s and 80s, but the point is most of them are 17 to 18 and 35. So these people, I say to them, look, I remember being your age, and I had even more inferiority complexes then than I do now. And I thought, sure enough, I was going to be a failure. I couldn't make a living. I couldn't do this. I couldn't do that. I'd never do as well as my father in this or that, or my brother who was a genius IQ, and blah, my aunt who was Phi Beta Kappa from Radcliffe and, had a master's in Shakespeare and English and was on the stage for 20-some years. I couldn't compete with these people, and I felt very inferior. And I finally have realized that I only need to do, which is what I tell my students. I say, you only need to do 3 things to feel good about yourself and have a good life. Number 1, you got to do your best at everything you do. I don't care what you do. You can be a brain surgeon or a street sweeper or whatever. It doesn't really matter. The point is, whatever it is you're doing, if you're washing dishes or walking the dog or playing pinochle or tennis, or doing a handwriting contest, or trying to lose weight, or mowing the lawn, whatever it is you're doing, give it 100%. And if you don't want to do that, don't do it, because you're going to not do a good job. You're not going to be proud of what you do. When you do your best, you're going to do well enough at virtually everything that you're going to be able to hold your head up. When you do your best is all it takes, mate. Believe me. And the second thing is, you got to be as loving as you can be to every human creature and all the domestic creatures out there. You got to be as loving as you can be, and that's hard to do because you got to put other people's interest ahead of your own, or at least even with them. And so being loving is a huge thing, and you'll never be completely loving. But the point is, you got to do your best. You got to work on it every day. And you got to Try. And the last thing is the most important one of all. I tell all my students and all my 13 grandchildren, you got to train your mind. You got to go right back to Frank S. Caprio. You have free choice to accept or reject thoughts. Nothing compels you to think anything except your own desires. So use your mental switch and dictate your thoughts. Believe that you can improve. And guess what? You will. So that's my answer.
Excellent answer. Excellent answer, Lee. Lee, I'm wondering now, like our time is running out. We will definitely have you back for another episode, another conversation, but you are so busy. How do you take care of yourself? Self-care.
I don't worry about it. I have a routine. You know, I work out 5 or 6 days a week. I have my own gym, and I work out right next to this room here. And I go in there most every day around 6 o'clock, and I work out for an hour and a half. I watch my diet, and then I like to work. And I've been retired a long time, but I work at this, and I work to help family members, and there's some other things I do to help some people, but basically I work, and I really enjoy doing it. I don't worry about my health. It is what it is, and if something hurts, I go have it looked at, but otherwise I don't think about it.
Okay. Do you have any final words for people who stutter as well? I'm curious, do you have any final words for SLPs who may be listening to this?
Final words. Stuttering comes in an infinite variety of forms, but all of them come from mental habits. And what we call the stutter habit chain, as I mentioned before. The causes may well be as varied as are the effects. Regardless, there are methods, tools, strategies that will enable most everyone to replace the stutter habit chain with a fluency habit. In other words, the 150 years of believing that stuttering is a life sentence is not true. It's based on bad data. Stutterers now have the option of living seamlessly in the fluent world. Incredibly, an entire community of ex-stutterers, think of that, an entire community of ex-stutterers. There's only one in the world. And those fast becoming ex-stutterers now exist on this planet. It's called the World Stop Stuttering Association. It's a charity. It's funded by donations and very small fees. It's an IRS-approved charity. It offers books, master classes, a speech club, a social hangout, private coaching at a fraction of the cost of most therapists. And over 2,000 videos of hundreds of PWS going through the process of replacing the stutter habit chain with the habit of fluency. 2,000 of them you could watch, 2,000 hours worth. Over that. The cost of the entire program is less than the cost of 1 hour of most speech therapist time. World Stop Stuttering Association program also teaches stutterers how to use neuroscience method to fight non-speech issues like anxiety, anger, jealousy, greed, hatred, insomnia, you name it, and thus to elevate their lives. So in closing, if you stutter, you owe yourself and all those with whom you now or ever may speak a trip to World Stop Stuttering Association. Join it and exercise your option of fluency. If I'm still on the planet, I'll help you personally. If I have the hours. If I'm not, WSSA is staffed by ex-stutterers, my students, who have learned the methods that work. Some of them stuttered a lot worse than I ever did.
Mm.
As the great playwright George Bernard Shaw wrote, life is not about finding yourself. It's about creating yourself. Now is the time for stutterers to start to begin creating themselves and elevating their lives. Greg, most of the population is far too busy with their own problems to give much or any thought to stutterers and stuttering. So in closing, I commend you for doing these podcasts, whatever your reasons. Stutterers need to be heard, and they need to learn that they have an option to be fluent. So thanks so much for giving me some of your time.
Well, Lee, thank you so very much for giving us all this time to be part of our Some Stutter Law conversation. I know, listening to you as a person who stutters, who has years of lived stuttering experience, you really have given me a lot to think about and a lot to consider.
At least read this before you talk to me again. At least read this.
And what one is that again now? Short course.
Go on Amazon and type in my name.
Oh, okay, for sure. Okay.
It's the short course book. I mean, that's only 86 pages. Even you have time for that.
I do, Lee. So again, thank you so very much, and we will be in touch, definitely.
Okay, Greg, it's wonderful meeting you. All the best. Keep up the good work.